The reception had barely started when Emily Carter's entire world quietly began to fall apart, and she didn't even know it yet. She was standing near the gift table, laughing at something her aunt had said, still wearing the smile she had practiced in the mirror that morning. She had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, she would be standing outside a closed door, listening to the man she just married describe her as an opportunity instead of a wife. She had no idea that the happiest day of her life was about to become the day she learned the truth. And by the end of tonight, she would have to decide whether to confront him immediately or stay silent and find out exactly how deep this went. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The ballroom was warm with candlelight and the smell of roses. Somewhere near the band, someone had started a toast, and laughter kept rolling across the room in waves. Emily had been searching for Jason for almost 15 minutes because the photographer wanted one last picture before the sun went down. She checked the bar, the terrace, the hallway near the kitchen. That's when she heard his voice, low and steady, coming from behind a half-closed door near the coat room. She almost called out to him. Instead, something made her stop walking. It was his tone, calm in a way that didn't match a wedding night at all. "Jason, you can't keep doing this," his father Richard said, his voice tight with worry. Emily froze with her hand still resting on the doorframe. Jason answered without hesitation, and his voice had none of the warmth she had heard from him 3 hours earlier at the altar. "Doing what, Dad?" he said. "Pretending you love her," Richard answered. There was a pause long enough that Emily's chest started to hurt. Then Jason laughed, quiet and short, the kind of laugh that has no joy in it. "I don't love her," he said. "I married her for her money." Emily's fingers went numb. The bouquet slipped from her hand and landed softly on the floor. She should have walked in right then. Later, she would ask herself why she didn't, but her legs simply wouldn't move, and some part of her needed to hear the rest, even if it destroyed her. Jason kept talking, and his voice grew colder with every sentence. "Once everything is signed over, none of this will matter," he said. Richard's voice shook. "And if she finds out?" "She won't," Jason answered. "She trusts me completely." Emily pressed her hand against her mouth so no sound could escape. Her wedding ring, still warm from the ceremony, suddenly felt heavier than anything she had ever worn in her life. Only 3 hours earlier, this same man had stood in front of 200 people and promised to spend the rest of his life loving her. Now she was standing in a hallway in her wedding dress, learning that promise had been a performance. But there was something neither Jason nor his father realized yet. Emily Carter had not built 3 businesses from nothing by being someone who fell apart the moment life turned on her. She had learned, a long time ago, how to keep her face calm while her mind worked. And standing outside that door, she made a decision that would change everything that followed. She would not confront him tonight. She would find out exactly what he was hiding and why. To understand why those words cut so deep, you have to go back to where this all began. 2 years earlier, in a small coffee shop that neither of them would ever forget. Emily was 31 when she met Jason, though nobody looking at her life from the outside would have guessed how far she'd come to get there. She ran a growing clothing brand out of Charlotte, North Carolina, one she had built from a spare bedroom into a company with real employees and a real office. But she never forgot the years before that, when her mother raised her alone after her father passed away, counting coins at the kitchen table some weeks just to make sure there was dinner. Those years shaped her more than any success ever had. She had promised her mother once that she would build something no one could ever take from them. Her mother had only smiled and told her, "Just don't let money make you forget people." Jason worked as a financial consultant, and the day they met, he was so busy checking his phone that he knocked his entire coffee down the front of her coat. "I am so sorry," he said, looking horrified. Emily laughed despite herself. "You just baptized my coat," she told him, and something about the way he laughed back, easy and a little embarrassed, made her stay another hour just talking. He didn't know who she was. He didn't ask about her business or her house or anything that mattered to most people who found out what she was worth. He asked about her mother. He remembered small details, the tea she liked, the songs she hated, the way she went quiet when something was bothering her. 6 months later, her mother finally met him properly over Sunday dinner, and afterwards she pulled Emily aside in the kitchen. "You love him," she said, not really asking. Emily nodded. "I think I do." A year after that, Jason proposed under a tree in a small park where they used to walk. No crowd, no cameras, just the two of them. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he told her, holding her hands. "But I want you next to me for it." Emily cried and said yes without a second of hesitation. She had no idea that less than a year later, standing in her wedding dress, those same words would come back to haunt her completely. The wedding day had felt like something out of a dream. Her mother cried, walking her down the aisle. Jason's hands were shaking so badly during the vows that the officiant had to pause and let him breathe. "I'm terrified," he whispered to her before the ceremony began. "Of what?" she asked. "Of how much I love you," he said, and she believed every word of it. The only strange moment came during his father's toast, when Richard's smile never quite reached his eyes, and his voice cracked slightly on the word family. Emily noticed it, but she brushed it off as nerves. She had no way of knowing that Richard's discomfort had nothing to do with nerves at all, and everything to do with a secret he had been carrying for over a decade. That night, after backing away from the door in silence, Emily returned to the reception and forced herself to smile through the rest of the celebration. When Jason found her again, he touched her cheek gently and asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," she said, and her voice didn't shake even once. That single moment taught her something important about herself. She could hide pain better than she ever imagined, and she was going to need that skill for what came next. Over the following weeks, Emily didn't confront Jason, and she didn't tell her mother what she'd heard. Instead, she started quietly checking things. She discovered that 3 weeks before the wedding, Jason had contacted her lawyer, asking about transferring partial ownership of her company, claiming it was her idea. Her lawyer, confused, had refused without her direct signature. When Emily learned this, her hands went cold. She began digging further and found emails between Jason and a financial contact she didn't recognize, along with a string of payments coming from an account with no name attached to it that she could identify. She hired a private investigator, a quiet, careful man named Robert Hayes, who came recommended by a friend from her college years. 3 days later, Robert returned with photographs. Jason had been meeting someone regularly, a woman named Claire Bennett, who Emily immediately recognized as his college girlfriend. "Why are they meeting?" Emily asked, her voice flat. "We're still confirming that," Robert told her. "But there's money moving between them, and it isn't small." Emily sat with that information for a long time, turning her wedding ring slowly around her finger, trying to understand how she had missed all of this. Meanwhile, Jason grew impatient at home. He started asking pointed questions about her estate planning, about what would happen to her businesses if anything ever happened to her. "Why does that matter right now?" she asked one evening. "I'm your husband," he said. "That's not an answer," she replied. And for the first time, she watched something flicker across his face, something close to frustration. A few days later, he brought her documents to sign, paperwork that would quietly give him greater control over her company's finances. She read through them carefully, then slid them back across the table. "I'll have my lawyer review this first," she said. Jason's jaw tightened. "Don't you trust me?" he asked. Emily looked at him steadily. "Should I?" That night, Robert called again, with new information that changed everything Emily thought she understood. Claire Bennett hadn't simply been an old girlfriend resurfacing. She had been helping Jason with something far bigger, something involving his father, Richard, and a business dispute that reached back nearly 15 years, long before Emily and Jason had ever met. "There's something you need to know about your own father," Robert told her carefully. Emily's stomach dropped. "What does my father have to do with any of this?" she asked. Robert paused. "Everything," he said quietly. "It has everything to do with this." That weekend, a plain envelope arrived at Emily's house with no return address. Inside was an old photograph of Jason as a boy, standing beside a woman Emily didn't recognize, his mother. On the back, someone had written a single line in careful handwriting: "Ask Richard why Jason grew up hating your family." Emily called her own mother immediately, her hands trembling as she asked if she'd ever known a man named Richard Reed. There was a long silence on the line before her mother finally answered, her voice heavy with something Emily had never heard from her before, something like guilt. "Your father had a business partner once," her mother said slowly. "Before you were born, his name was Richard Reed." Emily gripped the phone tighter. "Richard is Jason's father," she said. Her mother went quiet for a long moment. "I know," she finally admitted. "I've known since the wedding invitation arrived, and I didn't know how to tell you." Emily's mother explained that years earlier, her father and Richard had built a small trucking company together, and that everything had fallen apart after her father accused Richard of stealing company funds. Before the truth could be proven either way, Emily's father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and the accusation died along with him, leaving Richard's version of events as the only one anyone remembered. Everything connected at once inside Emily's mind: the marriage, the pressure to sign over her company, the strange tension at the wedding, Richard's fear. But one question still didn't make sense to her. If Richard was the one with something to hide, why would Jason marry her at all, instead of simply avoiding her family altogether? Robert called one final time with the answer. "Your father left something behind before he died," he said. "Controlling shares in a trust, quietly folded into what later became your first company. Jason's mother found out about it years ago, before she passed away, and she spent the rest of her life convinced your father had stolen everything from their family. She raised Jason to believe the same thing." Emily sat in silence for a long time after that call ended. Jason hadn't married her out of love at first. He had been raised on a story where her father was the villain, and marrying her was supposed to be the quiet correction of an old injustice. But the story he'd been raised on wasn't true, and somewhere along the way, his father knew it. Emily drove to Richard's house the next afternoon without calling ahead. He opened the door, and the color left his face the moment he saw her expression. "You hurt us that night," he said quietly. "Yes," Emily answered. He stepped aside without another word and let her in. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard sat down heavily in his armchair and finally told her the truth he had been avoiding for over a decade. "Your father didn't steal anything," he said. "I did. I was behind on payments I never told anyone about, and I took money to cover it, thinking I'd pay it back before anyone noticed. Your father found the discrepancy first." "And you let everyone believe it was him?" Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard nodded, his eyes wet. "I panicked. I made it look like the missing funds led back to him. His reputation was destroyed within weeks. I didn't think it would end the way it did. He had a heart attack 3 months later," Emily said. "I know," Richard answered. "I've lived with that every day since." Emily asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since the phone call with her mother. "Then why did you marry your son to me? Why send him after my company at all?" Richard looked down at his hands. "Because my late wife never stopped believing your father ruined us. She raised Jason on that story until he believed it too. I tried to stop it once I understood how far he was willing to go, but by then, it was already happening, and I was too much of a coward to undo it." That's when the front door opened, and Jason walked in, stopping cold when he saw Emily sitting across from his father. "You know," he said quietly, Yes, Emily answered, standing to face him. For the first time since she'd met him in that coffee shop 2 years earlier, Jason had nothing to say. Emily slid off her wedding ring and set it gently on the table between them. "You never loved me," she said. Jason shook his head slowly. "Not at first. I thought you were the reason my family lost everything. I thought marrying you was owed to us." "And now?" Emily asked. His eyes filled with tears. "Now I know none of that was true. And somewhere along the way, loving you stopped being part of the plan and became the only real thing about any of this."
"That doesn't undo what you did," Emily said, her voice steady even as her chest ached. "I know," Jason said then. "I know it doesn't." She turned toward the door, and he called her name once, quietly. "Was there ever a moment you actually loved me?" he asked. Emily paused with her hand on the door frame. "Yes," she said. "That's what makes this so hard." And then she walked out, leaving both men sitting in the silence of everything they had built on a lie. In the months that followed, Emily didn't destroy Jason publicly, and she didn't touch a single share of her company out of spite. She simply moved forward. She expanded her business into 2 new states, and she started a small foundation in her father's name, one that quietly helped young entrepreneurs from families who didn't have much starting capital, families like the one she grew up in. Richard eventually came forward with records that cleared her father's name completely, more than 15 years after his death. It didn't undo the years her family had spent under a cloud that was never theirs to carry, but it gave her mother something she hadn't had in a very long time: peace. Almost a year later, Emily received a letter from Jason. She almost threw it away without opening it. When she finally did, there was only one line written inside that stayed with her. "You were never the opportunity I thought you were. You were the person I was too blind to deserve." Emily folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She never replied, because some chapters don't need another conversation to close. Sometimes closure is simply realizing that the person who hurt you no longer holds any power over how you see yourself. There's an old saying that never measure someone's love by what they're willing to take from you. Measure it by what they're still willing to protect when there's nothing left to gain. Jason once believed Emily's money was her greatest weakness. He was wrong. Her ability to stay calm, investigate quietly, and walk away with her dignity intact was what made her strong, not her bank account. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this story. Sometimes the people who claim they need you the most only need what you can give them. And sometimes the person who seems to have shattered your entire life ends up being the reason you finally discover exactly how strong you really are. So here's a question for you. If you were Emily standing outside that door on your wedding night, hearing those words, would you have confronted him right then and there, or would you have stayed quiet and investigated first, the way she did? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, type "I choose myself" so we know it reached you. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story, because sometimes the person sitting right beside you is holding a truth you've been searching for your entire life. And sometimes the deepest betrayals arrive wrapped in the sweetest promises. Not everyone who marries you loves you, but the right person will never leave you questioning whether you were loved at all.